I submitted my application on July 5th, and then I got my first 2 interview invites on September 15th. So
Yeah,
it
there you
was
go.
quite a waiting game.
It was a waiting game, and that's just part of the process. So interviews, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the number of interviews that you got. And I'm going to get my popcorn and water ready because there was a lot of interviews. And also share, just kind of give us a brief overview of what interview days were like. I know there were a couple that were both virtual and in person. And any questions or any particular questions that kind of stood out that were maybe tricky, or ones that you didn't prepare for or maybe didn't think about. So interview days.
So I applied to 17 programs. Like I said, I was very blessed to hear back from 11 programs with interview invites. And unfortunately, 2 of them were on conflicting days. So I accepted 9 interview invitations. And those 9 interviews were to Children's Mercy Hospital here in Kansas City, Denver Health, St. Louis University, Iowa, NYU Langone, Tampa, University of Florida, Naples, Cincinnati Children's, Texas A&M, and UNMC in Nebraska. So that was the 9. That was the 9 I interviewed at. But I also heard back from San Antonio and Case Western and had to turn those ones down, unfortunately, due to conflicting interview dates.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
And that's always tough. Hard, because you don't want to turn down opportunities because you're like, what if that was the program, I was meant to be at? But, everything works out for a reason, and you just have to keep telling yourself that through the cycle and stay positive and optimistic about all of it, because, as long as you're hearing back from programs and getting interviews, that's a good sign that there's something that they like on your application, and that means you get the opportunity to get your foot in the door and go there and interview. So like Dr. Darwin said, I had a couple of virtual interviews. So I had 2 virtual interviews and 7 in person, which made for lots of fun places to go and visit.
You had to travel. I hope you got your frequent flyer miles together because you did a lot of traveling.
Yeah, definitely. My last 2 interviews were in the same week. And so I went to school Monday, and then I left Tuesday afternoon and had a social for that one in Dallas, interview on Wednesday. On Thursday, I traveled down to Naples, Florida, had a social there that evening, and then interviewed in Naples on Friday. So I had a couple of those back-to-back interviews that were kind of crazy, but it made for some fun places to stop by and good people to see along the way too. So
what were some of the hardest questions that you had in your interview?
So my very first interview, the hardest question I got was, what is an animal that you are most alike, or you could use to describe yourself as professionally?
What is an animal that you can use to describe yourself professionally?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's different.
So that was a very challenging question. And after that interview, me and Dr. Darwin actually had the opportunity to meet and talk about that question. And he had some great input to say for that, that I still remember. But some examples that he said, if you do ever get this question, would be, you can say you're like a beaver because they're really meticulous when they're working on and building their dams. Or you could say you're like a bulldog because you're an advocate for your patients and, you want to stand up and fight for what you believe in. So there's a couple different examples. If any of you get that question, know how to properly answer it.
They can be tricky. Some of those questions can be tricky, and some of them are even questions that they want to see how you think. How
Definitely.
you think on the spot. on the spot, like, and you'll get some case-based, clinical case-based questions from time to time as well. All of them is a reason why you need to get prepared. You need to practice. You need to know a list of some typically asked questions and how, some ways that you can answer them based on your personality, based on your experiences, based on the content that's already in your personal statement and your application. So that's important to know as well. Well, you had some great interviews, 11 invitations, and you took 9, and you traveled between the West Coast, Midwest. I'm not Midwest, Mid America, and then also East Coast down in Florida.